Hello, everyone, and great Monday to all of you. We have another session here. And today we will host Dr. Kobi Michael, one of the top experts in Israel about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I will briefly introduce Dr. Michael, but before, I just want to update you about our great activity of FELNET this time. We're about to conduct a very important dialogue, actually a forum, a Middle East forum, and I'm sure that you will hear about it very soon. And it's great to have FELNET this time of our great challengers in the world. We see what's going on in Ukraine and in Europe, and unfortunately right now in Israel. And I think Dr. Michael is the most adequate person to talk about the current situation in Israel with the Palestinian and Arab terrorism. So before we will start this conversation with Dr. Michael, I will tell you a few words about him. Kobi Michael is a senior research fellow at the INSS, the Institute for National Security Studies, and editor of the journal Strategic Assessment. Among his primary research interests are conflict resolution, strategy, national security, civil-military relations, socio-military relations, failed state and peacekeeping and state-building operations, and of course, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Dr. Michael served as the Deputy Director General and head of the Palestinian desk at the Ministry for Strategic Affairs. He was a member of the faculty at Ben-Gurion University in Beersheba, a senior faculty member at Ariel University, and a visiting professor at Northwestern University in Illinois and Peking University in Beijing. He has published widely in his field, including 18 books and monographs, and over 100 articles and chapters in books, and has been awarded several academic prizes, among them the Yarif Prize, the Chechik Prize, the Yitzhak Sadeh Prize, and the Israeli Association for Political Science Prize, awarded for the best book of 2008 and 9. Good evening, Dr. Michael. It's an honor to host you here. How are you today?
Thank you, Ori, for the nice and surprising introduction. Good evening, everybody, or good morning, good afternoon. And I was asked to talk about the current situation, and I assume that all of you are pretty aware to the events in the last 2 weeks in Israel. And I think that I prefer beginning by saying that we have at the INSS, I would say, a very serious dispute, and I think that in the last days, it looks that those who are in my camp, okay, or those who are holding the paradigm that I share, become to be with the upper hand, okay, because the dispute was, are we facing another wave of terrorism, which is mainly, I would say, a sequence of individual terror attacks committed by individuals who are inspired by ISIS or by the Ramadan or by some other events or some other atmosphere, or maybe we face a terror system, something which is much more organized, complicated, and conducted. And I think that we are in the second paradigm, which means that Israel faces a terror system which is composed of several components, which has some generators, and there is, in addition, inspiration, okay, above all of the Ramadan and maybe some other things. But the most important thing is that we are dealing with a system which has an organizing rationale, which has components and generators. And I would like to elaborate on that. And in order to make my point, I would like to go back, or to take you back almost a year ago to May 21, which is known as the guardian of the walls. And actually, what happened a year ago in May 21 is that Hamas changed the rules of the game vis-a-vis Israel. Hamas elaborated or expanded the equation vis-a-vis Israel by adding to the Gaza Strip East Jerusalem, the West Bank, the Arab citizens of Israel, and South Lebanon. And actually, since May 21, Hamas has succeeded in improving its strategic position in the Palestinian arena, mainly vis-a-vis the Palestinian Authority / Fatah, and assuming that Hamas doesn't see itself as a partner of Fatah, but they prefer to perceive themselves as a replacement for Fatah, a replacement for the Palestinian Authority, and understanding that their endgame, strategic endgame, is actually to control the entire Palestinian system, which means the Palestinian Authority and the PLO. I think that if this is their strategic aim, then we have to understand what is the strategy which is used by Hamas since May 21. And what we see is that Hamas uses a dialectic dual strategy with a sort of internal contradiction in it. Because of that, it's a dialectic strategy, but it is, I would say, very well constructed, and it has an organizing rationale, where on the one hand, Hamas wants to unify 5 fronts against the state of Israel as a terror feast, okay? And when I say 5 fronts, I mean the Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem, the West Bank, the Arab citizens of Israel, and South Lebanon. And in the very same time, they are making all the efforts in order to isolate the Gaza Strip and to keep the Gaza Strip calm in order to serve their 3 major strategic interests in the Gaza Strip. The first and the most important interest for Hamas in the Gaza Strip is the ability to rebuild their military capacities and infrastructure, terror infrastructure, that were damaged seriously during the last operation a year ago, because they prepare themselves to the next round with the IDF that will come. And they needed the calm in order to rebuild their capacities. So this is the first interest. The second interest is to assure or to ensure the continuation of the reconstruction project in the Gaza Strip, or even projects, not only one project, which are led mainly by Egypt and financed by Qatar. And all of these projects, all of these reconstruction projects, first improve the economic situation and the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. Secondly, they improve the political situation of Hamas vis-a-vis its constituency in the Gaza Strip. And thirdly, it improves and strengthens Hamas position vis-a-vis the Palestinian Authority. Because we have to understand that there is a zero-sum game between the Palestinian Authority / Fatah and Hamas. And each achievement of Hamas is a loss for Fatah or for the PA. And the third interest that Hamas has in the Gaza Strip is the working permits which are given by the Israeli government to Palestinian workers in the Gaza Strip. And today the number is 20,000 permits. And the government of Israel intends to increase this number to 30,000. And we have to remember what is the salary or the average salary of a Palestinian or Gazan Palestinian worker in Israel in comparison to the average salary of a Palestinian worker in the Gaza Strip. If the average salary of a Palestinian worker in the Gaza Strip is something around 500 shekels for a month, the average salary in Israel is 8,000 shekels for a month. Okay, and therefore, Hamas understands pretty well that by having many Palestinian workers in Israel, actually, they have the capacity, the ability to improve the situation in the Gaza Strip on the one hand, and to have more taxes in order to build more terror infrastructures on the other hand. So these are the three major interests that lead Hamas to keep the Gaza Strip calm. But in the very same time, Hamas works, and even works very hard, in order to build and to build the other fronts, to strengthen the other fronts, and to escalate the situation in order to deteriorate the stability, to embarrass the Palestinian Authority, to show that the Palestinian Authority is incompetent. And therefore, Hamas, during the last year, does several things. First of all, they build their capacities in East Jerusalem in order to escalate the situation, and they, from the first beginning, they were targeting the Ramadan, because Ramadan is a very sensitive time, not only for the Palestinians, but for the entire Palestinian wall. And they know that the Haram Sharif, Temple Mount, is a holy site, not only for the Palestinians, but for the entire Islamic wall. And this is a great occasion in order to escalate the situation, and they build their capacity for deteriorating the stability and for escalating the situation in East Jerusalem during the entire year since last May. So this is one effort. The second effort is to build their capacities, mainly terror infrastructures in the West Bank, in order to export terror attacks and very severe and serious terror attacks from the West Bank to the State of Israel. The third effort is the terror infrastructure that they are building in South Lebanon, and they are fully coordinated with Hezbollah and Iran. And by the way, in last May, during the military campaign, they operated this front, and they launched some rockets from South Lebanon, once again with full coordination with Hezbollah and Iran. And the fourth effort is vis-a-vis the Arab citizens of Israel. They are broadening the channels, they are deepening the channels, and they are looking for the most radical groups among the Arab citizens of Israel, understanding that those who are motivated by very radical religious and national ideologies will be pretty suitable in order to commit or to conduct or to operate terror attacks against Israel inside the State of Israel. And they don't need many of them. I mean, it is enough to have some dozens in order to create a huge chaos here inside the State of Israel. And their expectation is that the retaliation, the Israeli retaliation, will be so severe and aggressive that it will drag the entire population of the Arab citizens of Israel in order to escalate the situation, in order to deteriorate the situation, to undermine stability, and to broaden the gaps between Arab and Jews here in the State of Israel. So for 1 year, Hamas operates or uses this dual or dialectic strategy, and they also strengthen their cooperation and coordination with the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And here we come to the last 2 weeks, okay, or to the last events, because most of the events, or at least the last 2 terror attacks were conducted by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or at least with, by people who affiliated themselves with the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And at the end of the day, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad became to be a sort of proxy for Hamas, in addition to being a proxy for Iran. We have to understand that Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, both organizations, are Iranian proxies. These are not the same proxies. There are differences between Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Hamas is much more independent. Hamas has a broader, I would say, consideration and calculation, because this is, I would say, a sovereign ruler in the Gaza Strip, and they have to take into consideration the responsibility that they have towards their constituency. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad has no such considerations. And the Palestinian Islamic Jihad is fully dependent on the Iranians. And we have to ask ourselves how it comes that the Palestinian Islamic Jihad became to be so strong, so significant, so violent, so active in the northern areas of the West Bank, of Judea and Samaria. And I think that the answer is Iran, because the Palestinian Islamic Jihad cannot exist without the Iranian assistance, without the Iranian financing. And Iran transferred a lot of money to the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and Iran did a lot of efforts in order to smuggle weapons from Jordan to the West Bank for the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. In many occasions, we succeeded in preventing these smugglings, but in some other occasions, they succeeded in smuggling these weapons from Jordan to the West Bank. And at the end of the day, in the last months, we see that the Palestinian Islamic Jihad became to be the leading organization in the northern areas of the West Bank. Hamas is much weaker in the West Bank because Israel and the Palestinian Authority works very hard, separately and together, in order to mow the grass all the time and not enabling Hamas to be very effective from the military point of view. But they do succeed from time to time. And just 2 months ago, the General Security Services, together with the IDF, caught a group of 57 Hamas activists in the West Bank that prepared themselves to commit terror attacks inside the state of Israel, including suicide bombers, including laboratories of explosives and weapons in the West Bank, and it was only 2 months ago. And when Hamas has some difficulties to operate or to export terror from the West Bank, they use the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in a very successful manner as a sort of a proxy. Now, we have to understand it is not a very, organized system. There is no hierarchy there. Hamas doesn't give orders to the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. You have to commit a terror attack now in Tel Aviv and tomorrow in Hadera. No, this is not the situation. But they are fully coordinated between of them. And whenever the Palestinian Islamic Jihad can operate or can export a terror attack to the state of Israel or in the West Bank, they do it, and Hamas uses it and leverages it. Okay, and we have to go back just a week to April 2nd, to the meeting between Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of Hamas, and Ziad al-Nakhaleh, the political leader of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They met, and after their meeting or after their conversation, they published a joint declaration saying that both organizations will continue their close cooperation and coordination in the political and the military aspects. Okay, so there is no doubt that Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad are well coordinated between of them. When we see what happened in the last 2 weeks, we understand that this is, unfortunately, can be seen as a sequence of successful terror attacks, or the other side of the coin, unfortunately, a sequence of Israeli failures to prevent these terror attacks. But we have to understand that, or we have to think in a relative manner, understanding that along the year, the Israeli security establishment, the Israeli intelligence prevents hundreds of terror attacks. And you can find, just for an example, in the General Security Services web, the report about the year of 2021. And in this report, you can find details about more than 500 terror attacks that were prevented by the General Security Services and by the IDF and the Israeli police, which means that generally speaking and relatively speaking, the Israeli success is not less than a miracle, okay? It is a huge success. But, you know, there is no 100 guarantee. You can do 100% of effort. It doesn't mean that you have 100% of success. And unfortunately, it is a sequence of success of terror attacks that succeeded. But much more serious terror attacks and much more terror attacks were prevented during this era. And therefore, it will be wrong, I think, to refer to the terror attacks of last 2 weeks as a sort of a wave, something which is randomalic, okay, something which you know, can be connected to the Ramadan, or can be connected to the frustration of some Palestinians in the West Bank, or connected to the Negev summit that was held 2 weeks ago in Sde Boker. Okay, all of these circumstances, or all of these events that I have mentioned, have their importance, but these are not the main reason. The main reason is the organizing rationale of a very oiled, constructed, organized terror system, terror campaign that Israel faces at least a year since last May, since the last operation. And the main generator of this system is Hamas, together with the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, supported and assisted by Iran. Okay, Iran plays here a very significant role. We have to understand that and try to imagine how more significant will be the Iranian role or the Iranian influence once they will reach to the new JCPOA, okay? Once they will have much more resources in order to feed the Palestinian Islamic Jihad on the one hand and to feed Hamas on the other hand, okay? Just imagine what would be here. And in addition to these two generators, okay, we have another generator, which is the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority, on a regular and continuing basis, incites against the state of Israel, against the Jewish people, delegitimizes the very existence of the state of Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people. And they are champions of the world in using dual language. And the main champion is Abu Mazen. And unfortunately, there are too many peoples among the Israelis, and mainly in the international community, who are very impressed from the condemnations of Abu Mazen with regard to the last terror attacks that occurred in Israel. I'm really not impressed from Abu Mazen, not from his condemnation now and not from his condemnation before. Because a day after the last condemnation of Abu Mazen, okay, we saw senior officials of the Palestinian Authority, which as far as I remember, Abu Mazen is the president of the Palestinian Authority, okay? We found them in the house of the Palestinian terrorists from Ya'bed, okay, who committed the terror attack in Tel Aviv last Thursday. And they brought the condolences of the Palestinian Authority. They brought with them the promises that the family will be compensated. They named the terrorist Shahid, and they made him a new national hero. And I can assure you, because I follow this system, and I follow all the world of incitement in the Palestinian arena for many years. Okay, I can assure you that in a very short period of time, we will find some schools that will be named on the name of this terrorist. And in the next year curriculum, he will appear in the Palestinian official curriculum as a national hero. And the family will get salaries till the end of their life. And this is not less than supporting terrorism. This is not less than indoctrinating the Palestinian society for terrorism. And therefore, Abu Mazen, like Arafat, okay, on the one hand condemns, on the other hand supports terrorism. And if we will analyze the text of the condemnation, we will find there no word about condemn. Okay, he doesn't use the word condemn. He doesn't use the word terror. Immediately, he made the symmetry between Jews and Palestinians. And then he adds, of course, all the accusation against Israel about Al-Aqsa, about the settlements, about the occupation. And therefore, this is not a condemnation. This is an operation code which is well understood by the Palestinian constituency. They know exactly when Abu Mazen condemns, or when a Palestinian leader condemns, and when a Palestinian leader makes as if he condemns. Okay? They understand it pretty well, believe me. And therefore, and in order to conclude, because I assume that you will have some questions to ask me, I think that we have to understand the essence of the terror system that we are facing. We have to understand that as long as Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, that, by the way, has the popularity among at least 50% of the Palestinian people, okay? This is not a marginal minority of the Palestinian people. I would say that the Fatah becomes to be marginal minority, not Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad do not recognize in the state of Israel, do not recognize in the right of the state of Israel to exist in any borders, okay? They do not accept the Oslo Accords, the Oslo Agreement, and they are not ready to negotiate with the state of Israel. And they believe that they will be able to whip Israel from the map or to demolish the Zionist project by the armed resistance. Hamas perceives itself as the leader, okay, or the spearhead of the armed resistance. And they are doing all the efforts, as I said at the first beginning, to combine all the fronts in order to create more violence much more significant violence, because they believe that this is the way that they will win the Israeli project or the Zionist project. And at the end of the day, if not tomorrow, and if not in their generation or in their life, it will be in the next generation or in 5 generations from today. We have to understand that their, I would say, time dimension or time perception is something which is totally different than our time perception, okay? They don't think in terms of tomorrow morning. They think in terms of centuries, okay? And they say, we have the kingdom of the Crusaders here for 200 years. So we will destroy the Zionist project after 300 years. But at the end of the day, we will destroy it. If not in our generation, in the next generation. And therefore, as long as they exist, as long as they are capable to launch terror, to murder Jews, to slaughter Jews, to dance on the blood of Jews, and you just have to see what is going there in the Palestinian streets, in the Gaza Strip, in the West Bank, okay, and even in some Arab countries around us, mainly in Lebanon, when they succeeded in murdering Jews, how happy they are, and how many ceremonies, okay, and as long as this exists, okay, we will continue facing the terror system and the terror campaign. And it will not end tomorrow, and it will not end in the day after tomorrow. And we have to be resilient, and we have to be able to tackle this system, and where it's needed to do it very aggressively. And I think that now it's the time to be much more aggressive. And fortunately, I'm happy that the Israeli government eventually embedded or adopted the understanding that this is time to be more aggressive, mainly in the district of Jenin. But I think that this is the time also to change the rules of the game vis-a-vis Hamas. We cannot accept the dialectic strategy of Hamas, and we cannot cooperate with that. And unfortunately, in order to earn some calm for the short term, we are going to pay a very high price strategically, a very high price for the long term. And we have to change the rules of the game vis-a-vis Hamas. We cannot cooperate with them on this basis. We have to make life for them much harder in the Gaza Strip, okay? And we have to stop also the dual game or the dual play that we play vis-a-vis the Palestinian Authority. On the one hand, okay, we decrease money from the taxes that we collect for them because they pay salaries to the terrorists and to their families. And we have a law in Israel that doesn't allow the Israeli government to pay money for that to the Palestinian Authority. So we take the money from them on the one hand, and on the other hand, because of their deficit, financial or budget deficit, we give them very comfortable loans. Okay, so we have to play to stop playing this game, and if they prefer paying money for terrorists and for the families of the terrorists instead of using the money to build the Palestinian state, to build the Palestinian institution, to take care for their people, so this is their problem, not our problem, and they have to deal with that.
Thank you, Kobi, for those words. I think it's always great to hear from you. If for our audience, I think that Kobi represents the mainstream of the Israeli society, and I think it's great to have him here. One question, Kobi, before we'll let the audience also ask you some questions. You talk a lot about Hamas and Islamic Jihad. What about domestic terrorism here in Israel? We saw that one of the terrorists was Israeli Arab. And you know, when we hear the statement of Ayman Huda, member of parliament, member of the Knesset, who said yesterday, I think it was a shocking declaration, he said correct me if I'm wrong, he called all the Arab police officers and policemen to withdraw and take off the uniforms and not fight terrorism and not join the forces here in Israel. I think it's, some also argued in the parliament that it's actually a saying of treason. How can you say about this? And what is your comment? And also the terror attacks conducted by Israeli Arabs. Maybe you can share with us your thoughts.
I think that it is a very good question. And I think that we have to stress that there are radical groups among the Arab citizens of Israel. And I think that the warning alert was given in May 21 in the riots during the last operation, okay? And during the riots in the mixed cities in Israel. And with all the respect to the sociological, anthropological, psychological, economical explanations which are given to the participation of Arab citizens in such riots or in terror attacks inside the state of Israel, I think that these are not the main explanations, and they cannot be accepted as explanations. Okay, and I think that the main explanation is that there are some groups among the Arab citizens of Israel who are very radical, very extreme, very violent, motivated by religious ideology or national ideology or the combination between both. And unfortunately, they cooperate in this way or another with the other extremists that we have here in the sphere around us, be it Hamas or the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or if you want, the spirit or the inspiration of ISIS, okay? It doesn't matter. They are motivated by the same idea that I have explained before, okay? And this is the unwillingness to accept the existence or the legitimacy for the existence of the state of Israel here in the region, in any borders. But unfortunately, these groups, which are minority, by the way, they are not the majority of the Arab citizens of Israel. These groups are minority. But as I said before, you don't need a lot of people, okay? You don't need big numbers in order to escalate the situations and to drag Israel to a total chaos in the domestic arena, okay? Just need a sequence of successful terror attacks in order to deteriorate the situation and to ignite the fire between Jews and Arabs here in Israel. And we have extremists, not only among the Arabs, we have extremists among the Jews as well, although there is no any kind of symmetry between of them. But unfortunately, there are political and religious leaders among the Arab citizens of Israel who encourage these radicals. You mentioned Ayman Odeh, okay, but there are some others as well. I think that Israel is in a sort of catch-22 as a democratic state, okay? Because on the one hand, there is a freedom of speech, freedom of organization, but on the other hand, this is not a normal state or a conventional European state. We live here under different circumstances and conditions, and I think that this is time to rethink about what is allowed and what is prohibited. And I think that this is time to rethink about some changes with regard to some laws, mainly with regard to the illegal weapons, okay, in the Arab society. And we have to understand that the very easy access to weapons in the Arab society is something that makes terror attacks to be very, very lethal, very, very destructive, okay, very dangerous. And I think that we have to understand that this is another component in the system that I have described before, okay? And dealing with the system, we have to deal with this component as well.
Thank you very much, Kobi.